One of my favorite movies from a long time ago now, it's hard to think of it as an old-time movie, but I guess it is the movie Oh God, which starred George Burns and John Denver. And it was actually written by a Jewish person, Larry Gelbart, and the idea of the movie was that God appears to a human being. Now, of course, in Judaism, God doesn't have a shape or a form, so of course God would not appear to a human being, but if you set that part of the movie aside, which of course is what the whole movie is about, a lot of the things that are said in the movie are very Jewish. So the first time that God actually appears, God is represented by George Burns, the first time that George Burns appears to John Denver in the movie is when John Denver is taking a shower. Not exactly the moment you'd want to encounter God, when you're naked and wet in a shower. And so needless to say, John Denver's all out of sorts, he's confused, he's embarrassed, he's upset. And what does God say to him? What does George Burns say to John Denver at this disturbing moment? He says, "Shave." And John Denver looks at him and says, "Shave? What has that got to do with anything?" And George Burns calmly explains to him, look, when you feel like your whole world is out of sorts and upside down and turned around, you do a ritual. You do something you're familiar with and comfortable with. It helps you to ground yourself, to feel like you're a human being again, to feel that you have some sense of control over your life. Do a ritual that you're used to, that you're comfortable with, that you do all the time, and it helps to give you structure and context for your life. And that is such a brilliant statement and explanation for what a ritual is supposed to do. It's supposed to provide a grounding for us, a regular opportunity for us to experience life in a particular way. But as I always like to say, that's only half of what a ritual does. Half of the purpose of a ritual is to provide a regular time to do a certain thing, that you do it over and over again so you feel comfortable with it. Human beings want to feel like we have structure in our lives, and rituals provide those structures. But the other half, the other major purpose of a ritual is to contextualize and concretize our values, our ideals, our hopes, and our aspirations. It gives us something to remind us of what we're here to do in the world, the purpose of our life's existence. Now, I never thought about this before, but I did this morning when I was preparing for my talk. So shaving is something that many men do every day. It provides a regular context for our lives. I even have a mantra that I say to myself when I wake up in the morning that includes shaving so that I don't forget. In any case, so it's a regular thing we do. But what is the purpose in this case of shaving? What is the purpose of the ritual? And I think for men who shave, the idea is this is a kind of a presentation we think of ourselves as. We think of ourselves inwardly as. We think of ourselves as clean-shaven men, and we want to present ourselves to the world as clean-shaven men. There's nothing against men who have beards. Men who have beards think the same thing. They think of themselves as men with beards, and they want to present themselves to the world as men with beards. But there's a certain feeling they get, a certain emotion they get with the way they present themselves. And that's what shaving does in a meaningful sense. This is how we want to look. This is how we think of ourselves. Now, this morning, we read the beginning of the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, a very challenging book for many modern Jews because the rituals talked about in the opening chapters of Leviticus are the sacrifices. And of course, nobody in the world, as far as I know, nobody in our part of the world has sacrificed animals for thousands of years, certainly not the Jews. And so it's hard for us to understand, to get our heads around what the meaning of sacrifices was to our ancestors. I'm going to try and give you some window into that possible understanding of it in a moment, but it is difficult and challenging for us to understand. Nevertheless, it is a ritual, and as a ritual, it serves those two functions. There were regular sacrifices prescribed for regular occasions. Every day, the priest would offer a sacrifice in the morning. The first thing the temple would open up, the sacrifice would be on behalf of all the Jewish people, as if to say we're marking a new day. It's a new day for the world, a new day for the Jews. We're still here, God's still here, we still have a relationship. And in the afternoon, a second offering was made by the priest on behalf of all of Israel. Every single day, these two sacrifices were offered. They provided a context, a structure for the daily life of Jews all over the world. But they also had a meaning. And if we try to understand what that meaning is, I think the first thing we need to realize is that when our ancestors were doing sacrifices, that's the way people all over the world believed they had to worship their gods. They just naturally assumed that gods wanted sacrifices, and they couldn't imagine, they couldn't conceive of having a relationship with God without sacrifices. That's what's different about our world today. Nobody does sacrifices, yet we feel like we have a relationship with God. But part of the purpose of it was that it felt like it gave them a tangible, visceral attachment to God. And if we imagine what it was like for an individual to bring a sacrifice to the temple, we could see that it would have an impact on his psyche, his emotion. You take your hard-earned money, you buy an animal, you bring it to the priest, and then you watch it get killed, basically. And it's a very dramatic moment. But then it is roasted and in most cases given back to you as barbecue to eat and celebrate in God's presence. It had a powerful impact on their psyche at the time. So even though we don't do it now and it's not part of how we want to worship God, at least maybe it gives us an idea of the power and meaning of what it was during those times. Now, of course, we're living now in very topsy-turvy times. It seems like the very earth is falling apart underneath us. We're isolated from each other. We're at home. We hardly go out. When we go out, we have to worry, do we touch something? Did somebody sneeze on us? It's a whole topsy-turvy world. And so the same advice that George Burns gave to John Denver is advice that we can take today. Do a ritual. Perform a ritual that you do on a regular basis. It'll help to ground you. It'll help to focus your attention. It'll provide a context and a structure for every day of your life. And that's one reason why we have been broadcasting these services, short as they are, for 15, 20 minutes every evening at 6 o'clock, where we do them on Shabbat over here and put them out to you every day, because this is how Jews structure time. We structure our time with prayers. Our prayers, our rabbis told us, have replaced the sacrificial system. And so instead of structuring our time and our days and our lives and our ambitions by the structure of sacrifices in the temple, we do it through the prayer and worship services that we do. That's why we're doing this here. That's the regularity of it. But then there's also the meaning. And one of the problems with rituals is that because we do them on a regular basis, sometimes we forget to think about what they actually mean. We just do it because we're doing it by rote, on automatic pilot. We do it every day. I have to tell you that the last couple of weeks, reading the prayer book has gave a whole new meaning to these prayers for me. And I imagine for many of you as well. Many of these words pop right off the page and say, wow, our ancestors experienced the same kind of pain, the same kind of uneasiness, stress, anxiety, tension that we are feeling now. And they put it into words for us. They resonate with us now. So the prayers now have not just a structural purpose, but they also provide intrinsic meaning and value to what it is that we're experiencing in our lives today. And so as we continue to do these kinds of services and provide this structure, we understand why it's important. I want to add one last thing. The word for sacrifice in Hebrew is korban. And as many people have commented, it comes from the Hebrew root likrov, to come near, to come close. The idea of the korban was it was one way to provide an offering to God as a way to come close to God, to feel like you're really in God's presence. But also was a way that we could come close to each other. Thousands and thousands of Jews would come to the temple every single day, and they would go there and they'd see other Jews doing the same thing, and they'd feel like they're part of a movement, part of a people, part of a congregation, that they have purpose and meaning because they're part of a nation together. And of course, we can't come close. We can't come close to each other now, but we can come close to each other through the internet. And at least it's that. In a few months, hopefully, maybe sooner, hopefully sooner, we will be able to come back together in small groups, maybe larger groups, and we can be together again. That's certainly the preferred way of coming together and praying, to be physically together so we can see each other and feel that we're part of a tight community. But I know that behind that camera and out in the Ethernet are people watching this. And we all know that we're watching these things together. So we're participating together the best way we can now under the circumstances. We are coming close to each other through these prayers. So I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. May we continue to experience the community, the power of community, the power of ritual structuring our lives, and the meaning of ritual to connect us to God and to each other. Shabbat Shalom.